Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast. This podcast is meant to bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Whether you are a current or aspiring short-term rental property manager, host, or real estate investor, you're in the right place. Dive in with us to uncover the captivating stories and golden nuggets from industry heavyweights, including leaders, operators, investors, syndicators, founders, and entrepreneurs. So thank you. Really, thank you for embarking on this journey with me. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast, and I promise I'll do my best to deliver value-packed episodes that hopefully will not just inform, but also help inspire the next generation of real estate and hospitality professionals. Truly yours, Sebastián Muñoz. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring different sides of the same coin when it comes to hospitality, real estate, entrepreneurship, and everything vacation rentals related. Today, I'm more than excited to have a good friend of mine, Wil Slickers, podcaster, founder of the Hospitality.fm, host of Sleek Talk, the hospitality podcast, and Good Morning Hospitality. Angel investor, property manager, basically industry superstar. I just, more than anything, a super nice guy. Wil, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you on.
Sebastian, good to see you and good to see you take action on the podcast. Sorry that I gave you a super long title of introduction, but looks like you got almost everything off my LinkedIn. So glad to be here and thankful for the time to chat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, listen, before anything, I want to thank you for all the support that you've shared behind the scenes, from the mic to choose to the streaming platform that I should record this on. It's all, thanks to you. So really thankful. I'd like to start by asking you something before we go into the actual story, which you've already talked about in many other podcasts, and is basically understanding what does hospitality mean to you?
I can give you the cheesy definition. Hospitality to me is more of anticipation of others and what they need. I always kind of go back to my Marriott days of anticipation of the guest needs. You should know what they need before they even know what they need. And I think hospitality doesn't need to be restricted or confined to the industry in itself of hotels, short-term rentals, travel. I think we all show hospitality in our day-to-day relationships with our family, our friends, people we meet in coffee shops, on the street, wherever. So to define it, it's anticipation of needs, but it's also making others feel at home.
Interesting. Now, you stumbled across hospitality and hotels somewhat by accident because you were doing things that you were not enjoying, and you knew you were a people person. So talk to us about how you got into the hotel space and what got you to enjoy it after all, because you definitely have sticked around.
Yeah. The shorter version of the story is more focused on I got an experience or gotten introduced to entrepreneurship through a family friend who was kind of like, hey, I see potential in you. You should think about, starting your own business, being an entrepreneur. And I was like, I've never heard the word entrepreneur. So you're going to have to define all this stuff for me. And basically, he explained it. And I was like, sweet, I love that. And I just had bought a car and had my first monthly car payment that I had to make. And I was like, man, this is kind of a bummer. I wasn't making a ton of money at the time. So I was like, this is a bummer that a lot of my money that I'm working hard for at this one job, was going towards his car and gas and insurance, all the fun stuff that you get with a big adult payment. And I was like, oh man, I should chauffeur people around and start driving people and like create a whole chauffeur business in order to not have to pay my car payment, basically, or to make up for my car payment. And the long story short, I started a chauffeur and event company where I planned weddings. I had some, event planning experience through Harley Davidson. And so I was like, I take that combination and chauffeuring and kind of make a business out of it. Well, exactly 1 year later, I had to close that business down because I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I didn't know what prices to charge, how to streamline operations. I took on way too much debt, just jumped in without really doing any research, which can be a blessing and a curse. But long story short, after I closed that business down and lost all this money and just didn't know what to do with my life, I then see my suits hanging up in my closet and I go, I remember picking up some fancy clients at this one hotel downtown in Spokane. I loved the lobby ambiance. I remember seeing a bunch of people in suits and dresses and the cocktails and the food and the just the laughter and the music, And so I was like, I'll go walk in that hotel and I'll apply and see if I can work at that hotel. It was a new property. I think it was only a year, maybe a year and a half old when I walked in and basically asked for the manager. I was in my suit and tie, clean cut, shaven, all that stuff. And he interviewed me and hired me on the spot. And I fell in love with hotels after, going through a baptism by fire at the front desk. I think I was on like day 2 or 3 where I had probably 600 check-ins I had to get through as a new employee with no hotel experience. And it was rough, but at the end of the day, I loved it. I fell in love through the chaos and with meeting people and sharing stories and the little moments in between the check-in and the checkout, which were always super fun. So that was how I got into hotels.
Got it.
And
you were quite
yeah.
young too, no? Weren't you like 20, 21 years old at that moment?
Yeah, I think I just turned 21. I was maybe a year. I'm trying to think what the year timing was because I joined the Army National Guard in 2020 or 2014. So yeah, I was like, I think maybe 2015 is when I got into this hotel, like the later half of 2015. And yeah, just was.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. What do you think is the impact on having started, at the very bottom, so to speak, in terms of, being front office, having to literally learn the business from the ground up. When you look backwards to that experience today, what do you think has been the role of you having started there, and how has that impacted you to achieve the success you've achieved so far?
I think I look back and I'm very, very thankful. That's how I started. I'm thankful I didn't go in with a degree or with, a immediate management position or whatever it might have been. I loved the energy. I loved the hustle and bustle and figuring stuff out. It was like every day it was different. You did a lot of the same tasks, but with the people that were coming in and out and the people you got to work with, everything was always different and changing and just chaotic, but a great chaotic, right? And so super thankful. And I think that role from the front desk to becoming supervisor to then eventually working my way up through management at different properties and stuff. For me, it gave me the respect and understanding of what my team would go through, right? Like if I were to buy a hotel or build a hotel or do something in a leadership position, right? I know the shit show and the struggle. And sorry if I'm not allowed to swear on the podcast, but the struggle of what the front desk agents and what the housekeeping goes through and what the maintenance staff goes through and valet. Like I got to be a part of a lot of that. And my boss, I'll give him a shout out, my first ever manager at the hotel, but Eric Peluso, hated me as a front desk agent sometimes because I didn't stay put at the front desk. I would go inspect rooms because I heard housekeeping was slow or I missed a couple people, and I would be out in valet and I would be chatting with them and learning how their system worked, and I'd be in the restaurant and like clearing dishes out of the lobby and just everywhere. I couldn't sit still, but obviously knew that when my time at the desk was needed, I would stay. But I got to experience the hotel in a very different way than probably just staying put. So I think that really impacted my shift when I got into leadership and more into kind of my own business.
That's super interesting, and I can totally relate. At Angel Host, I started by doing guest services, and at some point, I was covering 8 a.m. to midnight, Saturdays and Sundays, and you
Yep.
develop thick skin, and I think it's a very good school. Now, talking about school, you've been very open about the fact that you didn't particularly enjoy your time at school. You didn't feel like you were learning, and part of what you're trying to do right now with hospitality.fm is build that education that you wish you had. So tell us about what you think the, let's call it, traditional education system is missing, especially when it comes to this industry we're in, and what is it that you're trying to achieve with hospitality.fm to counterbalance that lack or that gap.
Yeah. What I'm about to say, I hope people don't take offense into it in the sense of I think there's a lot of things that we can't control when it comes to the current education system. Thankfully, there's some great people, great teachers, great educators in a pretty bad system, I would say. But not every, I would say, teacher, whatever, professor, educator, I think probably knows exactly how bad the system is from a student point of view. So in high school, middle school, even elementary school, I was never the best student. I sucked at math. I sucked at reading, mostly doing due to not being able to sit still long enough. I don't think fully grasped what school was. I didn't understand why did I have to go to this thing all day when previously my mom and dad were letting me play outside and I was with friends and sisters and my brother, and like it just didn't make sense. And then as I got older, I got exposed pretty early into, you know, the bad crowds and not knowing where I fit. So one moment, like I was friends with everybody, which wasn't a bad thing. I don't think it's a good skill to be able to adapt into certain social groups, but I'm friends with the sports and the jocks and the band kids and the, every type of clique you could think of in high school. But that caused a huge identity crisis for me. And I got, into some bad stuff and, drugs and depression and all the things. So school for me was just a failed system in the sense of it was more of a copy and paste. And I think I needed a little bit more one-on-one attention when it came to my education. So long story short, to answer your question, I think education fails students or fails people in the sense of not providing any customization and not adapting to how people learn differently. I remember my dad hated that I would want to listen to music when I did my homework. He said, "You can't do your homework and listen to music. There's just no way you're like retaining that." I was like, "Actually, no. It actually helped me and get it done faster because I like the rhythm, and the rhythm helps my body kind of focus and control." The things I'm not being distracted by, hopefully. Anyways, with Hospitality FM, as we've kind of gotten past a few pieces of the story, I would say the platform as a network, is available for people that learn differently, and I think learn through conversation, learn through audio, learn through community, and literally network. Right, like there's a whole group of people from short-term rental experts to hotel operators and food and beverage leaders to you name it, entrepreneurs above and beyond within the space, technology, you name it. You've heard and met and know a lot of the people that we've had on shows and have, hosting podcasts. And so this kind of network and platform is for those who can learn through that, learn through community, learn through unstructured organization and unstructured network that pretty much caters curated content directly for the industry. So
Yeah,
very
no,
much
that's
a
awesome.
content focus.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think another thing we both have in common is that opinion when it comes to the school system having failed us. I don't think it. I tend to be the type of person that assumes responsibility for what happens, but still, I'm like, I wish I had not spent all those years sitting down, you know,
Yeah.
being taught things that I thought were completely irrelevant. I wish I had started the path of self education earlier. And
Yeah.
I know, you are a Gary Vaynerchuk fan, Tony Robbins fan. So my question is kind of going back to the story. So you had just started 21 years old, you start working at this massive hotel. You're learning a lot, but it's very stressful. And then you made a decision that I think is quite wise, which is you realize at some point that the hotel was too large for you to get the kind of one-on-one mentorship that you needed uh, to develop your skills and take your career to the next level. How did you come to that conclusion? Where did that self-awareness come from? Is it something that Gary Vaynerchuk said, or what was it?
Definitely not a Gary V moment. I would say it just came to the point of asking enough times and getting rejected. And I know there's so many podcasts and influencers and influential people that talk about you should be able to hear no 1,000 times and never be discouraged. Well, I think also too, there's a good sign of hearing no and like being comfortable with that, but also hearing no enough time from the same people that have constantly, given you praise behind the scenes, but never done anything else outside of that verbal praise. Like, hey, Will, you're doing great. Your guest service scores are awesome. The team loves working with you. You're always early, blah, 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 blah. Like, great, cool. That was all the praise I would get. And then at the end of the day, I would say, hey, I want to learn more. I want to learn about revenue management. I want to learn how we, decide on what rates to charge every night. I want to learn about the back end stuff. What is a GDP? Like, what is Marcia? Because we were a Marriott hotel, so we had Opera as the property management software, which is an Oracle program, but then you had Marcia, which was basically the booking interface, and I'd seen my boss play around with it, but never really could figure it out on my own because he had access and I wanted to learn it. Well, eventually, enough times of hearing no, like we need you at the front desk, you're one of our best people. It's like, yeah, I'm one of your best people, but I want to do more. I want to be behind the desk my whole life. I want to be in the office where Dan's at and making all the decisions and talking to the managers. And like I had bigger ambitions, I think, than just being at the front desk. And enough of that kind of just really, I think, ruins the culture when you're not giving your team the proper opportunities to grow. So I was getting frustrated. I was plain and simple. I got annoyed, frustrated, beat down, kind of just unappreciated. Felt like it was like, hey, I bring a lot to the table and I'm not getting a lot back. And not that it's always supposed to be a give and take, but especially with an employer, I think it was just one of those things where I had to like do the pros and cons list basically at home and said my pros are I'm pretty much guaranteed a job at this place. If I do leave, they will give me a reference. They'll most likely fight for me if I do leave. Like maybe that will be the biggest pro. The cons, I'm not growing. I feel frustrated. I'm getting to the point where I am bored, where then I, as a person who, when I get bored, I lose passion and excitement around what I'm doing, which again is something I'm trying to, always be better at, because I think just because you lose passion doesn't mean, or because you get bored doesn't mean you should lose passion. You should use the passion to kind of fuel the lack of boredom in a way. But long story short, I came to the conclusion after just kind of weighing it out and talking to some friends and then realizing like, hey, just start applying for jobs. I also didn't like the city I was in. I was kind of struggling with not having a community around me. My best friends had just moved to Florida, and I was going through a pretty rough mental time with the amount of rain and winter and the gloom, the gray. 9 months of seasonal depression basically just sucked. And so I started looking at other cities and where would I be happy if I went to it, even though I'd be starting over. And started applying, and I was realizing that my resume, my letters of recommendation, people were jumping at hiring me, like literally like, yeah, come in for an interview, like we'll hire you today. And that's when I was like, okay, if I maybe go out and then see what it's like to work for a non-flagged, smaller property, independent hotel, then that will be better experience on my plate. And I can decide where I want to go from there and how I want to grow my career. Not knowing what the path would actually be, but thinking like, hey, if I can see the other side of the coin, then maybe that will help me make my decision.
I think there's two lessons here that I want to really point out. One, for employers out there that have a team. If your team is showing proactivity, if someone from your team is showing interest, wanting to learn more, don't lose them. Don't let that happen. Make sure that you give them more responsibility. Make sure that you teach them, that you spend the time, the extra time needed to keep them engaged. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what happened with Will is going to happen with your team.
Well, I also want to say, like, I wasn't perfect. Like, guarantee, like, yeah, I got a lot of praise and I was good at my job. There's moments where that energy and that type of passion that I could definitely, I could have worked on. I could have had that, more honed in. And so I think another lesson for managers or owners listening, any of your audience right now, just because you have really productive and proactive employees, they're not going to always be perfect. They're going to have moments where they're not great with a guest who's angry. They're going to have moments where they're impatient with the team member, so they take over and just start doing everything themselves. Like, that's not great skills or great things to have, but you should be, as a leader, be able to see that and help mold them better, so that way they do become that perfect employee that you never want to lose. I wasn't perfect. I could have been molded better, but again, I think the lesson from my point was that leadership that doesn't take the opportunity to mold them definitely loses out on a really big opportunity for the brand, the hotel, and the team.
Huge, super important. And then the other side of that lesson would be for anyone that's currently working somewhere. It's like, what you did is basically you took your ego and you put it aside, and you said, even though it might be it might look better to be with this big brand, the fancy name, the reputation that comes with it, you prioritize learning, which, especially when you're starting out, I think more people should be doing, rather than aiming for the
Yeah.
fancy company or title. And just as long as you're learning, even though you're taking somewhat of a step back, you're doing so, but you're really getting ready for 3 or 4 steps forward.
100%. 100%. And you should, don't get comfortable with comfortability, if that makes sense. Like, you don't stay at a job that makes you feel comfortable. You should feel challenged, and you should feel like you're solving problems, and you should feel like you're growing a team and leadership skills and all that. And if you don't feel that, the brand, the title, the size of the property, all that stuff doesn't matter. None of that matters, because at the end of the day, you'll be less useful to, like, if I just stayed at my front desk job and clocked in, clocked out, did okay, didn't go above and beyond, but didn't do bad where I got bad scores or complaints from guests, right? I was mediocre, or it was just gray, right? I'm in between. If I go to a hotel that's independent, not flagged, bootstrapped, very cash flow dependent, whatever that thing may be, they're going to look at my resume, they're going to call my references, and they're going to be like, okay, like, he was all right. He showed up. That was cool. He's on time. That's maybe what we need. We just need someone who can show up. Cool. We'll accept it. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that position. You don't want to work for a company that accepts just that bare minimum. You want it to have them be like, holy crap, this guy's impressive, or this girl's impressive. I went out my way and got 3 letters of recommendation that were very well written. They were on, what do you call that paper? Letterhead. They had a letterhead stamp on. Like, I went above and beyond. And when you're interviewing, I remember specifically seeing the demeanor of the boss or the person I was interviewing with change, because the question would come up. And you, Sebastian, you're 100% right, in the sense of, they're like, why would you want to leave this big property that has endless budget, has all these departments, blah, blah, blah. And because to them, especially at a smaller scale, it's kind of a red flag. Like, oh, why is he leaving this really big fancy property? What did he do wrong? Or was he not good? Or whatever. They think you are probably not the best employee. When in reality, my answer was always like, well, I wanted to learn, and I could never get beyond the point that I was. I felt stuck. I want to learn, and I want to grow my career. That immediately changed everything in the interview, because kind of, yeah, they were excited for me to apply, and they wanted to hire me through a phone call or looking at my resume or whatever. But then they'd be like, wait a second, this is all too good to be true. Why would he leave such a fancy, comfortable spot? In reality, when you tell them that you want to learn and grow and have impact, I think that's when you can really stand out. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And there's things you can learn, and there's things that are harder to learn, right? And I don't remember if it was at the boutique hotel or if it was at the large hotel where when you were getting interviewed, the person interviewing asked you whether you felt more comfortable with technology and or with people, and then you said you definitely felt more comfortable with people, and they said, "Great, that was the right answer." Because if you had said the opposite, like I can teach you the
Yeah.
technology, but I cannot teach you the people skills. And I think that's what our industry is all about. Like hospitality is about, finding people that are good with people, that get energized by being around people. And as long as you can find that, we always say it at Angel Host, hire for personality and then develop the skills.
100%. And man, I love that you did your homework, Sebastian. That yeah, I've said that on a few other podcasts, but yeah, it was the big Marriott hotel. Again, my old boss, my first time manager, Eric Peluso, sat me down and goes, you know, how do you feel about people? And I was like, I love people. I have, 5 sisters, a twin brother, da 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 da. Like, I have a ton of friends. I'm very social. It's like, how do you feel about tech? You're going to be checking in people. You've never worked in a hotel before, and the software is a little weird. And I was like, no, I can learn that. I can learn that. And at the end of the day, he was like, yeah, I'm glad you said that. Those two answers in that order versus the opposite. Oh, I love technology. I can learn a computer software in a heartbeat. But people, yeah, whatever. They kind of piss me off. I'm not. People are dumb. Like he would have been like, all right, not going to move forward. Like you can't
Not
work
for
here.
you.
So yeah, that was a fun interview moment
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Now, Will. So you go to this boutique property. You're learning a lot because you're getting direct mentorship. Now, I understand it was your parents' property that became available. So you basically said, "Well, I know all these, practices and principles and strategies that work with hotels. Well, let's give it a try." And so that's kind of how you got into management. But when did you really see this as something that you could do full time, that and you that led to you, eventually leaving your job?
Yeah, I think it started with the podcast first, where I was kind of doing my podcast and was interviewing people after not really planning on interviewing people. I more or less wanted to go down the route of kind of what I was experiencing as a hotel manager, more or less of what am I learning with revenue management? Why do I think this system doesn't work great? Like, I wanted to kind of express that thought. And my parents came to me with this property. It was the second home. I grew up out on Camino Island in Washington State. But when I was later in high school, my parents bought this bigger house because we had a lot of people living under one roof, and they bought this bigger house just in town, kind of like Warm Beach, Washington, Stanwood, Washington, where I was going to school. And they had this apartment above the garage. I remember that they pretty much refurnished and redesigned. It was basically beams, right? It was just beams. So they put everything, drywall to hardwood floors and all this stuff. They redid it, made a 2 bed, 2 bath apartment. And they were doing long-term renters and just weren't getting the best tenants. You know, my dad was pretty anti pets, but he made the exception one time, and then the dogs ripped up all the hardwood floor because they were left alone too long, and all this stuff, right? Like, just was getting a really, and rent was always late, and blah blah blah. Like, just wasn't the best experience for them. So as I'm managing hotels and doing my podcast, um, my mom, I think, texted me, was like, hey, have you heard about this thing called Airbnb? We want to give it a try for the apartment, but we figured we would ask you for any tips and tricks because it's basically like a hotel, right? And I'd never heard of Airbnb and was kind of like, yeah, let me look at it. And I looked online and I did all my research and was like, yeah, this is basically the lowest barrier of entry into hospitality and to create your own hotel, basically. That's what I thought immediately. I was like, they have a check-in time, they have a checkout time, there's house rules, blah blah blah. And immediately I was like, yeah, let's go. I told my mom, I was like, you got to fully furnish the apartment. You can't do it empty because people aren't going to live there long term. It's just for 2 night stays or more, right? And we were going through it, and then I was like, dang, how do I get rid of a front desk? I didn't know how to check people in without a front desk because that was
Okay.
all I knew. And I just was like, man, I hate our locks. We have a queue of people trying to get their key cards at check-in. There's got to be a better solution for this Airbnb thing. So I'm like Googling stuff and I found smart locks and I was like, oh, this is it. Battery operated, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever, all the tech. And I sent it to my dad and I was like, can you buy one of these on Amazon and put it in the apartment for the front door? Because that's going to be your way of checking people in. And he was even kind of confused. And how will they check in if we're not here? I'm like, you don't need to be there. You give them a code. You know the code that you give them. They use it at the time of check-in and they check out. Like that's it. And I just remember to me at that time that was the most aha mind-blowing moment of this whole thing of short-term rentals. And because in my head all I knew was hotels, all I knew, that was my world. And it was like, these are my pain points that I'm seeing at my property. We had 70 all suite units, so jetted tubs, full kitchens, you name it, all that stuff, balconies. And I just remember the key cards demagnetizing and the line of people checking in exactly at 4 o'clock and causing some chaos in the lobby. And the lobby wasn't big enough to have, 70 families or 70 people check in at once. And, just these little things. And I was like, this is going to solve all my problems. And then, yeah, I basically fell in love with short-term rentals and started talking about it on my podcast, and one thing led on to another and it just kind of blew up. And then I realized, yeah, what am I doing in this hotel? I can go do this. And yeah, ended up, making enough money off the podcast to then go full time. And then I started my own management company, with some previous partners who I'm no longer with, but now I have a new company that I've been with, a partner for, almost 3 years now. So yeah, it's been
Wow. I
pretty
want to
fun.
make sure I get the order right. So basically what you're saying is by the time you start managing your parents' property, you had already started the podcast. How
Yeah.
far into your podcasting journey were you at that point?
Oh, my podcasting journey was pretty quick. So my first episode, I think, went out March 18th, 2018. And then from there, I was able to quit my job and be living off the podcast full time December 27th, 2019. So I was pretty fast in my shift. So it had to be at least maybe, I would say, give me 6 months into the podcast. And that's probably when I got exposed to the Airbnb thing. And then I saw there's this castle Airbnb or short-term rental property in my hometown or near my hometown. And I talked to the manager of that and started picking her brain on Airbnb stuff and all this stuff. So it was pretty quick into the podcast. I think my first maybe 2 to 3 months was me trying to figure out what did I want Slick Talk to be. But then once I started getting guest outreach, that's when I was going, okay, this is going to be an interview show and I'm going to interview people about hospitality and hotels and not knowing short-term rentals, but eventually short-term rentals and
Okay,
all the
that's
above.
interesting. So first it was hospitality, hotels, and then when you got exposed to short-term rentals, that's when it started shifting more toward that. So you quit your job because of the podcast, not because of
Yeah.
the management, because the podcast is making you enough money where you can now let go of your job. And
Yeah.
is that when you start managing more luxurious and interesting large castles types of properties right when you quit your job and decide to go full all in on podcasting, or did you give yourself some time to do just podcasting before you went into management?
Yeah. I remember specifically, I was still at the hotel and I was making money off the podcast uncontrollably. Didn't really like someone threw money at me and was like, hey, we want to advertise on this series you're doing. And I was like, okay. And then, 3, 4, 5 other companies wanted the same thing on this series specifically. And I was like, I just made 10 grand in a night, basically. This is crazy. Okay. And then that kept happening and kept happening. And then, my previous business partners came out to Oregon. And I remember we sat down and we wrote out our business plan to go luxury short-term rental management. We had one castle under management through our partner, and she brought that castle property with her. And then we started tackling after investors that were going after those same properties and taking those management deals. I wasn't with them for very long, to be honest, because we um, I quit right before COVID, so December 27th, 2019. And then COVID hit in March of 2020. I was in London at the short stay show or something like that. And that's when the borders closed and the world went into full pandemic mode. We made it through the pandemic for a little bit, and obviously people couldn't stay at hotels, but the partnership just wasn't the best fit. I had more aspirations for implementing more tech and streamline operations while focusing on the hospitality guest experience. My partners didn't see eye to eye on that. They didn't want to embrace tech, and I couldn't. I wanted to have technology. I don't want to do pen and paper all the time. So that was just kind of my route. I was ready to leave. So I ended my partnership agreement with them. They continued on. And then as I was doing the podcast still full time by myself, I started my second show, Good Morning Hospitality. And then my current business partner, who was my first guest on my podcast, actually kept he and I kept in touch very often. We talked maybe once a week, once a month almost. And he texted me one day, goes, I hear you talk about these short-term rental things. He just got furloughed from his hotel job. He's like, I want to know more. What do you think the opportunity is in hospitality for short-term rentals? And we hopped on a phone call, chatted about short-term rental operations and how you could do it remotely. Cause I was very passionate about, I want to travel and I want to have freedom. I don't want to be tied to a desk anymore. And, not a desk of working, but like a front desk. I didn't want to be tied at the property. Which there is power to be a local operator. I'm not going to say that there isn't, but basically it kind of gave him the whole rundown of what I'm hearing and how people are operating these companies and the technology behind the scenes and how it applied to hotels and blah, 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 all this stuff. And he basically goes, awesome, this is really good information. Thanks for letting me know. The next day he texts me again and goes, I want to start a property management company with you. What do you think? And I was like, I just got out of my old agreement. I think I have a non-compete, but my non-compete wasn't a time frame. It was a radius frame. So I could still manage properties, but I couldn't be within a certain radius of their properties that had signed under us when I was with them. So basically we made sure that we weren't signing any properties under there, and we formed Recreation Rentals pretty quickly after that.
Interesting. And just curious, for anyone that's getting into a partnership or considering getting into a partnership, what are some suggestions or tips you would give as far as, the kind of due diligence that you should do, or the kind of conversations that you should have with your partners around the vision, just so you're on the same page, having gone through a partnership that where you guys ended up parting ways, and going into a new partnership right after, I am assuming that you went in with more caution this time.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I don't want, like, there was nothing wrong with my other partners. They, again, are great people. I wish them nothing but success, and I've seen that they've been killing it since I left, and really proud of what they're building. So the thing I think I learned, and my kind of advice for anyone getting into partnerships, is to lay it out all on the table. Don't hold anything back. Don't, because that's what's going to end up hurting the partnership. I basically told my partners, hey, this is how much money I'm making a month on average. Obviously, it gives and takes. I'm comfortable to put X amount of capital into this business to get it up and going. But this is what I need my role to be, because I do have, again, my podcasts and my 2 podcasts at the time, that I love doing, and I can't give up unless I could only imagine giving these 2 up if this business was paying me triple the amount. Like, that would be the only thing that I could think worth giving up. And it wasn't obviously going to do that, because there's 3 of us. Property management, even though we were in the luxury sector where our homes were $1,500+ a night, still, again, like, when you're making commission of $1,500, it's still not a ton of money every time. So long story short, basically I laid it out on the table. I told them this is why I see my role fitting. I'm not the best with working with the investors. I'm not a real estate guy. I don't know I don't know shit when it comes to acquiring a home and doing all that stuff. So like, don't expect me to be in that realm. I can be your tech guy. I can make sure we have the right tech stack, from access control to dynamic pricing to property management software. You name it, I'm in. And then guest communication, streamlining, all that. Like I'm all about the hospitality operations and the tech, and they were cool with that. But I think at the end of the day, we just weren't aligned in that, where they wanted me to, but they also didn't want to, have the business pay for the tech. And I was like, well, we have to pay. Like, this is part of running a business. We have to, do it anyway. So long story short, we wanted the same thing in theory, but I don't think it actually came down to that in reality. So when I moved into this new partnership with my business partner, Adam Knight, he and I basically went through everything. I told him, I'm not giving up the podcast. I'm comfortable in these areas. I don't know how to, like, I'm obviously gonna have to learn, but I don't know how to run the finances. I don't know how to send owner statements. It's just not my area that I've ever dabbled in, right? So I need someone who's going to be more picking up the slack in the areas that I'm not good at. I'll teach you everything in the operational side, even though he had a hotel background. I was like, I know exactly how this all works for short-term rentals, and how to implement it. And he was in, and we both kind of assigned ourselves a role, saying like, hey, Adam, I'm going to deal with the owners and the monthly payouts and onboarding the properties and making sure the listings are built. But after the listings built, like, you're going to set up the communication automation, we'll both work on pricing to make sure that we're aligned with our owners and what they want to make every month. But like, I was taking care of the guests, the housekeepers, and the maintenance staff, like the day-to-day stuff. And he was really focused on the back end. And eventually that changed. But again, the reason why our partnership is still active is because we've been very on top of like, hey, I'm laying it all on the table here for you. This is what I can do. This is what I'm struggling with. This is what I need help in, or whatever it is. And it's worked out pretty well.
Open communication, that's super important. And so the business is still going on. What are you guys at currently in terms of portfolio size? I mean, just give us a sense of where you've come from and where you're at now when it comes to your management portfolio.
Oh yeah, it's nothing to be impressed by in my scenario, but it's always gone up and down because we've learned a lot on being in multiple geographical locations, the type of owners we want to work with, the properties we want. So when we started, we had my parents, and we were just fighting and tooth and nail to get any other property we could. And we got up to like 10 or 15 properties. And then we realized, ooh, okay, now we've proven that we can manage homes no matter what the quality was or anything like that. We should probably scale back, because not that 15 homes was a lot, but these are just not the properties and the owners we want to work with. They were lower nightly rates. They weren't in the best areas, so mostly seasonal. Maybe in really remote locations where just getting a cleaner in itself was a pain in the butt. So we just were like, okay, we need to hone in. And so we cut a bunch of properties. Now we're back up to 20. We have about 5 contracts out. So like we've gotten into a better rhythm, knowing that we want to be in this kind of experiential realm. 4 to 5 bedroom home has to be fully furnished by us. So we have an agreement that we control the design, we control the linen count, all the stuff that kind of goes into the guest experience. So working with the owners that are understanding that it's an investment to work with us, it's an investment to have a standard. So we've created that, and we only work with those who are accepting of kind of those terms. So we have, like I said, 20 properties, but we're in Canada, Washington State, Florida, and Pennsylvania. So those are the
That's
4
awesome.
locations that we are. Yeah.
That's awesome. And in terms of advice for anyone starting a property management company or looking at scaling it, I think you just touched on one thing that I can think of, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything else that comes to mind as far as setting the right expectations with your homeowners and not being afraid to set boundaries in terms of, if you want to work with us, we'll have to do your furnishing. If you don't like that, no problem. Go work with one of the many property managers that is not going to care if your couch stinks. But I feel like a lot of property managers struggle to because they want to accommodate to the homeowner's
Yep.
needs, they struggle to say, no, we need, full flexibility when it comes to the rates. Otherwise, there's no point in us working together. So what are some things like that you've learned along the way that you would give as advice to any property management company that's either starting or looking to scale?
100%. And I think, yeah, what you just said was perfect. Don't you work with everybody, then if you serve everyone, then you serve nobody, right? Like that is a true statement in a lot of ways. But I think you can serve everybody, but in a specific category. I love one of my friends and mentors and longtime people in the industry, Brooke Fotz from Vintory. He always says riches and niches. So the more niche you can be, the better off you will be, because if you just hone into one category, you'll destroy it. You'll be the top player. The money will follow when you're in that niche. I also think with Adam and I, he and I were, again, we had my parents' property, which was doing great. They were doing like $1,800 a month as a long-term rental. When we took it over, it was doing about $4,000 a month. So 3,500 to 4,000. That's a big jump in monthly income, and we can do that without having it to be seasonal. So we were able to make it almost recurring every month. When in particular, when they were doing it themselves, after I got them set up when I was at the hotel, it was doing okay. I think my dad got it to like 2,500 or 28, and on some peak months, but then some months they would have zero bookings and all the above. So I think for us, like Adam and I, in the beginning, we were just trying to get everybody and anybody. And then I think part of us, without knowing at that time, we're kind of afraid to hone into our hotel experience of standardization. Every hotel we worked at had a standard linen, standard amenity for coffee, a standard this, a standard that, standard check-in procedure, like all the stuff, right? Like they had the brand standards. And when we kind of got into the Airbnb short-term rental side of things, we were not really doing that. We were just kind of like, okay, this owner has this and this owner has that. Well, blah, blah, blah. Like we'll just work with them. And our houses were chaotic. It was not fun for me. It wasn't fun for our cleaners because everything was so different. So when we finally had shifted into this is what we built out the recreation rentals brand. What does the brand provide to our guests, to our owners, and to anyone else that we come in contact with? This is what we are. Great. Now we need to only work with those that accept the brand. So that's when a big thing shifted. Now we went from that 15, I think we went down to 5. Now we're back up to 20 with 5 more. So that growth, that 5 to 20 growth now, that 15 extra homes, they're all homeowners or one group of investors that said, yeah, we love this. A guest can stay with us in Florida and stay with us in Canada and stay with us in Seattle and have the same experience with a different property and a different scene. We focused on local partnerships, and that really became kind of what made us stand out a little bit more. We didn't just put Starbucks in the homes. We put local coffee roasters, coffee in there. We, did all the stuff. So there's standards with customization, right? Like, okay, if we're not going to have Starbucks, we're going to have a local coffee roaster. But let's say out in the Poconos, in the Pennsylvania, where there is no coffee roaster, what are we going to do instead? And when we can't find a local coffee roaster, if we're not using Starbucks, what's the standard, right? So going through that exercise was really, really beneficial for us. I'm very thankful. We have moments when we do our weekly stand-up that Adam will bring up something or I'll bring up something and we'll love the idea, but then we'll go, hey, does it fit the brand? Does it fit what we're doing? Is it in the work of the plan? And if not, then we can't do it. As much as it sounds like a great opportunity, as entrepreneurs get stuck on, right? Shiny object syndrome. We want to do anything and everything to grow and scale. But another quote, to quote another entrepreneur or CEO and just thought leader in our space, would be Steve Davis from Operto. He was on a fireside chat with me and our morning show crew, Brandy and Michael, for Good Morning Hospitality. And the whole conference was called Scale. It's called Scale Rentals. And so obviously we were talking about scaling a vacation rental management company and what that looked like for a tech provider like Operto. And he said, there was a time where we were just adding so much fuel to the fire and we grew so much that when we realized that, hey, in order to scale beyond this point that we're at, we actually need to scale back, because like we did in the early days of recreation, we just took everybody and anybody. But then when you sit back and you look at the numbers and you look at the time and the operations and what it does to the team and the brand and all this stuff, it actually wasn't real scaling. And so until you can do the same thing over and over again in a repeated system with refining and dedicated to getting that better, you need to scale back. And so he talked about how Operto scaled backwards in order to scale forward in the future. And that's what they did, right? And so I think that lesson applies to the tech providers, that applies to the operators, whether you're an Airbnb host or a property manager in a destination market. In order to scale forward, you need to really hone in. Who are you as a brand? Who is your company? Who do you work with? And I hate this term, but it's the only thing I think will click. But figuring out who's your avatar, right? Like, who are you serving? And I hate the word avatar, but more of like, what type of guests do we want? What type of homeowners do we want? What type of properties do we want? How are we going to use that property and the brand to attract that guest and to attract that owner? So I think that for us was the best scaling advice that we could do. Obviously, we're not huge. We're still small in terms of numbers, but we feel like our properties are now more profitable. Our owners are getting better served. Our guests are getting a better experience. And for us, we're actually not having to work as much because we have a standard across the board that all of our teams in every market know is consistent. So it's been a blessing in disguise.
Wow. Yeah, it's really not just about the size of the portfolio and how many properties. It's so much more important to have quality in place and sustainability and processes, that whenever you decide to hit on the pedal and start accelerating your growth, you're going to be capable of managing and welcoming that growth, rather than trying to go crazy scaling at first when you might not have the tech, the systems, or your team might not even be ready. So
Yeah.
I think it's very, very wise advice.
Yeah. And like to answer your question, I know I rambled basically, but to answer the real question of anyone listening on scaling, I think if you're just starting out, what you can do is grab your favorite brands, whether it's a hotel brand or a short-term rental brand. What pieces do you like about them? What do they offer their guests? How do they, streamline this? How do they offer that? Like, what do their units look like? Are they urban? Are they destination focused? Look at the best of the best that you love and literally pull your favorite things and create your own and make them your own. That again gives you a who you are, who you want to serve, from owners to guests to all the above. And you can avoid what me and Adam had to go through. You can avoid what Operto had to go through. You can avoid what other people are going through today and go scale properly without having to just accept everybody and everybody, to then realizing, oh, we got to cut back and then refine and move forward again. So save yourself
Absolutely.
time and yeah, do that. I wish I did 100%.
And in order to operationalize, defining who you are, I think one example that I like to use a lot, because we are, we're growing very fast at Angel Host, so we're
Yeah.
bringing on new people every week. So we do this thing where we do cross departmental training sessions, and me leading growth, I always welcome anyone that joins the company, and I always say, we have three values, and in our case it just happens to be excellence, growth, and happiness. I'd love to know what are your company values, but basically what I tell them is, think about values as if it was a pair of glasses. Like,
Yeah.
the only reason we have values is not so we can put it on the wall and look at them every now and then. No, is so that when you're facing a challenge, a decision, and there's not a process that's written, because that's what happens with startups, right? You might not always have a process written out on how you should handle this one situation. But if your value is, let's say, excellence, and you can translate that as, hey, you're going to act as if this was your business, as if you own this, and you can take those pair of glasses and just put them on, and now you have your excellence pair of glasses when looking at what the guest is asking you, or whatever situation you're facing. All of a sudden, values goes from being this blah 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 thing to a very practical decision making tool. So I'm curious to know first, like, what are those values, if you guys use values, or if you guys have it as principles, and also your thoughts on values or principles as decision making tools.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I wish I had my list open, because we have 6 at Hospitality FM that I basically apply to my daily life. And the reason why we chose these 6 was because the team also applies them to their daily life. So we didn't want it, like you said, we didn't want fluff on the wall. We didn't want a fluffy mission statement and a fluffy landing page on our website to show values. We wanted to say, here's what we live as humans every day. And this is what we're bringing to the table within our business, whether it's business or personal. So knowing that whether people are working with us in the business world, or if it's relationship wise with friends and family and loved ones, no matter what, they're going to get the same person. And I think that was really important for us, because our values live through each side. We don't change our values based on work mode or play mode. So we have 6 of them. Forgive me for not having them in front of me and having them memorized actually as well. But basically going into integrity. So integrity is really important for us. And one of our mission statements or integrity core line is about having the hard conversations, no matter how much the hard conversations would impact or benefit the company financially. So working with people, again, that maybe bring us a lot of money, but aren't a great fit with our culture and our team and or the other people that we serve. So that's just one of the things. You have to have the hard conversations, no matter whether they could benefit you in the sense of finances and other things, or if they're just hard in general and you're afraid of hurting someone's feelings that maybe doesn't align with you. Another one is that we are not family, but we are able and open to connecting outside of work in order to build true camaraderie. So I hated, and you probably saw this a lot on socials, especially like TikTok, when people were getting laid off during COVID, that companies that would say, we're family and da 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 da, like we love you and you love us and we're one big happy movement, da da da. And then, oh, well, we don't have money to love you anymore. So you're actually let go and there's no compensation. There's no this, there's no that, blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, by the way, we just raised $100 million in funding, right? Like that's, where a lot of those companies were going, and people were getting let go after spending years dedicated to this brand or company. Nothing specific to our industry, but anyways, all these companies that say we're family, I just hated, because then they treat their employees as if they were bottom of the barrel. So with us, again, we're not family. I'm never going to tell my team that we're a family and that we're happy and I love them in the sense of family, but we are able to have true friendship. I talk to my team outside of work. I know what's going on with their personal lives. They know what's going on with my personal life. We are able to have true camaraderie. Really important for us as a team.
And on this point, before you go on the other values, I think Netflix puts it very well when they say it's we're not family, we're a team, we're a sports team, right? In the sense that as long as you are contributing and you are helping others succeed, then we want you in the team. But it's not true that you're gonna just be sitting down and wasting everyone's time, not respecting everyone's effort, and actually being a liability rather than an asset. And we'll keep you around just because we love you and we're family. No.
Yeah,
it's performance first, but we can still have lots of fun. So I really love that. I really
Agreed.
resonate with what you said. You want to share like one or two more, or you want to go through the entire list? I think it's super relevant and interesting.
I'll make them quick. I just pulled it up while you were talking, so make it easy for you. And for the listeners, so core values and things that we really want to bring to the table, personal and business, to bring passion to the forefront of the industry and our content. So if we're not loving what we're doing, what are we doing? We want to be passionate about what we do. And like you said, have fun doing it. So to have a second would be to have the honest and even hard conversations in order to better ourselves, our creators, and our partners. And then number three, to only work with those that follow the first two ethos or the core values, and not to compromise that at any cost, even if it would financially benefit the company. So that was the one I was kind of mentioning earlier, to only work with those that follow the first two. That's super important for us. Number four, attention to detail, or as I'm changing it currently after I heard the founder of Hotel Tonight say, Sam Shank, suffer in the details. We want to suffer in the details. So number four is attention to detail, no matter how big or how small, is key for how we represent ourselves and our partners. Number five, we need to have fun and enjoy this journey. If we're not having fun through all of our hard work, we've lost our purpose in our day-to-day tasks. And number six, we are not a family and respect the boundaries outside of work, but we are and can be friends that support each other in and outside of our work in order to build a true camaraderie that is infectious to those around us. So
Wow.
that's the six that we live by every
Very
day.
powerful. I love that. And Will, looking at the time here, I mean, I could hold you for hours because this conversation has truly been very, very interesting and fun and exciting. Before we wrap up, I would like to ask you something that I'm personally very interested in hearing your thoughts of. And basically, you're a young founder, but you have so many things going on. You're juggling so many things. You have the podcasts, the network, management. Now you're an angel
Yeah.
investor as well, and you're what, 27 years old
28,
right now?
28. Yeah.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
happy birthday. But my question is, when juggling with so many different things, I'm sure there was a lot of sacrifices that had to be made since the very beginning for you to get to where you are now. How do you find, and I don't like to use the word balance, but that's what I say for so people understand it. What does balance mean to you, and how do you find a way to recenter? What's your go-to practice, or how do you find a way to just keep going when you have so many things going on?
Yeah, and I'm not strict on time right now, so we can go over just for FYI. But to answer the question, um, I would say I don't recommend this for a lot of people. The reason why I'm able to do so much is because I'm single. I don't have kids. I don't play sports. I don't do outside activity. Like, I'm active. I don't just work all day and go to bed. But I'm very much obsessed with what I do. So it's an obsession. I will say that. So it consumes my mental thought, even when I'm not doing it, even when I'm at social events or gatherings or anything in between. So balance for me is more in spirit of, am I constantly finding joy throughout my day? And the reason why I say joy rather than happiness, or again, work-life balance, where I'm only working 6 hours a day and I'm not answering email, all that stuff, is because a lot of people, especially that I've seen in my friend groups that aren't in their own business or entrepreneurial, people really only experience joy when they're not at work, when they're scrolling on their phone at night before they fall asleep, or when they're watching Netflix to numb the work day that they had. That's where I see a lot of people experience joy for the first time in their day. Not to say that there are other moments with family and kids and etc. But basically for me, I want to experience joy in everything I do. I want to experience joy while I have my coffee. I want to experience joy while I'm talking to a friend on the phone before my first meeting of the day. I want to experience joy while I'm reading a book. I want to experience joy while I'm sitting out in the sun and making sure I'm getting no screen time. I want to experience joy when I'm in 12 hours worth of meetings and recordings and constantly looking at my whiteboard of to-do things and projects and business roadmaps and all this stuff, right? I want to experience joy in everything I do. So for me, I don't really think I need balance in terms of the normal definition, because I want to experience joy in everything I do. So to answer in a shorter version, I don't have balance because I don't want balance. I am just experiencing joy. I love what I do. It's hard. It's not easy. It is a roller coaster, but I love it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, for other people, that's not aligned with what they want in life. But I know what my end goal is. I know what I want to do and where I want to be. But in order to get there, I'm fine with, not being so strict on when I do meetings and how many times I check my inbox and how many times I do phone calls and blah, blah, blah. I want to experience pure joy through it. And I think, with that mindset, it's helped me get a lot done. I'm very productive in my day, even though I do a lot. So it's just
I
been
love
kind
that.
of just like having that mentality with it.
Man, I love that for two reasons. First, you talked about obsession, and there's
Mhm.
this book I read when I was 15, 16 years old, changed my life. You love him or hate him. Grant Cardone wrote this book, and it's basically be obsessed or be average. And it really spoke to my personality, and ever since then, I've really taken that word and made it part of my identity very proudly, even though a lot of
Yeah.
people see it as a negative. It happens
Yeah.
so many times that people are like, you should do this, you should do that, you should spend less time working, you work too much. I've had people look at my schedule and again
Yeah.
those 12-hour back to backs, and they're like, I literally have nausea when I look at your schedule. And I'm like, I don't. I'm like
No,
looking forward to it, man. And
I'm
so
juvenated. Yeah.
exactly. So I do think it comes down to finding that thing where you can be obsessed so that you don't need balance. And there was this
100%.
book I was reading, the Almanac of Raval Navikant, and he was saying there's three ways you can retire in life. You can either decrease your costs to where you become a monk. So basically, you don't need to make any money, or you have enough money saved up in equity where just your interest pays off for your expenses. Or the third way in which you can retire is just do something you genuinely enjoy. Point.
100%. Yeah.
You're
Well, and
retired.
like what you said to the first point of like people being overwhelmed looking at your calendar and saying you work too much and you should do this instead and blah blah blah. I'll tell you one thing, and I'm sure you'll understand this out of all people, whether the listeners of your podcast do or don't. I think you would get this. I found true happiness in life, and I stopped struggling with my depression as much when I realized I was living my life off of other people's expectations of how I should live and how I should be. I was told my whole life that I was going to be a pastor and I was going to be preaching in front of the church and I was going to be doing this. No, I had a different calling, whether it's spiritual or not. And I then took that leap of faith to tell my parents, I'm not going to do that. Sorry, I love you, but I don't love that. I don't want to be doing that for my life and my career. Um, I also don't want people telling me that I work too much or I have too much fun. I travel all the time and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I want to live how I want to live. It's selfish and rightfully so. I think we have the right to be selfish of how we live. As long as, again, you're respecting others and not harming others in the sense of true physical harm. But at the end of the day, when I did that, my whole life changed on everything. I no longer struggled with depression and had, thoughts of, harming myself and constantly battling with who I wanted to be with because I didn't know who I was when I was alone, all these things. Right. And so when you can hone into that, you'll be one, way happier. And then two, you can pick out how do you want to retire? Because if you pick number three and you just love what you do, and I hate that a lot of gurus or influencers today say, just follow your passion, follow your dreams. Like that could be such a lie in some cases. Because your dreams and your passions, yes, they are passions and they are dreams, but what is worth doing, especially in our line of work, if you aren't willing to do it for free, for a certain period of time, then you probably shouldn't make it your full-time thing, because it's just a hobby, right? And you can love your hobbies. You can love what your job providing you the financial freedom and flexibility to have your hobbies. But for me, it was like, hey, I'm passionate about podcasting. I'm passionate about running short-term rentals. I'm passionate about business and entrepreneurship. But if I can't, at the end of the day, be okay with not taking the paycheck and putting money back into the business more than putting into my own pocket, at the end of the day, I shouldn't be doing that full time, at least, that was my biggest learning too. So I think there's a kind of a hidden facade around passion and doing what you love. But if you do what you love and you do what you love well, and you can make an income and you can make that ability to love it and have the financial freedom, but also being okay if you lost everything, that you would still do it, then yeah, I think that's the right road to go down. That's how you're going to retire
Absolutely.
earlier than most. Yeah.
And there's going to be things you're not going to like no matter what you do. So it's not, and I totally agree with you. People say, oh, find your passion, as if it's something you're going to taste once and you're going to know it's your passion for the rest of your life. No, first you need to get good at something, right? Develop
100%.
skills. At first, I'm sure you could probably relate to this. When you're starting, you have a lot of self-doubt. You don't even know what you're capable of. So how can you tell me about finding my passion when I don't even know what value I can provide to the marketplace? Like, how
100%.
about we start there?
Yeah, and just be a sponge. You don't know what you don't know. I didn't know a ton of stuff, and now I have my buddy David, who we'll be talking, and we'll meet a random stranger, and we'll talk about some random topic. And he's like, how do you know anything about this? It's like, I don't know. You just learn it along the way. You have to learn these things, right? So like, it's not that you go out and just, I love what I do, so I know everything, or I do what I love, so I know everything. No, you're not going to know you're not going to know what you don't know. And there's, like you said, hundreds of things I hate doing, but you have to do it. And like, you have to be okay with that. Like, don't focus on, oh, I hate editing my podcast, so I'm just never going to podcast again because I don't want to edit. Have fun with the edit. Learn some tips and tricks. Like, find ways to get creative with it and make it fun for you, even though you hate it. Do I edit all my stuff now? No, but I know how to edit if I need to, because that's how I started, right? Like, that's just little things you have to do. And I had to make it fun. I had to make, certain, like, learning the Adobe software and chopping and leveling out audio volumes and all this stuff, which is very tedious, boring work. I had to make it fun. You have to enjoy what you're doing with it. So like, there's ways around it. And getting your hands dirty is also the part of the process. Like, do the thing and enjoy it, because it's going to make you so much better. And then you will be doing the high stuff that you only want to do, right? I think that's kind of it's a sacrifice in the beginning to get the carrot at the end of the stick.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Will, I'll put an end on this, because otherwise I could literally keep you here for 2 more hours. That's how much I'm enjoying this. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for everything you're doing for the industry, all the content you're putting out there. It's super valuable. It's inspired a lot of us to take that step forward and start doing it as well. And I'm sure it will continue doing it for many more industry players. Really admire you, not just from a business standpoint, but just also from a personal standpoint. The fact that you can be serious and obsessed and detail oriented, but we can also have a lot of fun at conferences, and you can enjoy yourself as
in Orlando.
much. 4 a.m. in Orlando, you already know. I should have stopped recording this before we talked about this. Not just joking. It's part of the game. That to say, Will, that thank you so much for taking the time, and I really look forward to hopefully having you back in the show a couple of months from now. I guess just to wrap up, people can find you on pretty much anywhere. But what's your go-to platform?
I love LinkedIn. Find me, Wil with 1L Slickers on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect. That's my favorite spot to go.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Will, for taking the time, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Sebastian. You're killing it. Great job on the podcast. So thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you, man. Take care.